The great hull of Nexus Prime stretched for miles in every direction. Crystal walls sparkled with lights from 1,000 different worlds. Ambassador Lisa Grant stood at the human table, her hands folded behind her back as she watched the ceremony unfold. Today was special. After 5 years of testing and proving themselves, humans were finally joining the Galactic Council. Lisa had worked her whole life for this moment. She looked across the massive hall at the other species gathered here. The Korthak delegation sat at tables made of black metal. Their gray skin looked like stone, and their red eyes glowed in the dim light. They were warriors, everyone knew that. Their home planet was covered in battle scars from 10,000 years of war. Near them, the crystalline Vexi caught the light like living diamonds. They moved slowly, but with purpose. When they spoke, their voices sounded like breaking glass. Their wars were quick and brutal, shattering enemies into pieces before they could fight back. The Myrthal floated in water tanks specially built for the ceremony. Their blue skin rippled with patterns that showed their emotions. Lisa had studied their language for months. The patterns on their skin right now meant they were curious and slightly nervous. In the far corner, the Zephyrians clicked and buzzed to each other in their insect language. They looked like giant mantises standing on 2 legs. Their compound eyes reflected everything around them. Lisa knew they were watching everyone at once. General Ryan Parker sat beside her at the human table. His uniform was crisp and clean, but Lisa could see old scars on his hands. He had fought in the border wars before humanity met the other species. Dr. Helen Martinez sat on her other side, taking notes on everything she saw. She was their expert on alien cultures and religions. The ceremony master, a tall being with 4 arms and purple skin, raised his staff. The hall fell silent. His voice echoed off the crystal walls as he spoke in universal standard, the language all species used for diplomacy. Today we welcome humanity to our great alliance, he said. As is tradition, each new member must share their cultural foundations with the Council. We begin with the sacred topic of war and conflict. Lisa felt her stomach tighten. This was the part she had worried about. Every species in the galaxy had their own way of fighting, their own rules for war. And every species had gods or spirits that guided them in battle. The ceremony master gestured to the Korthak table. Commander Zakther stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow across the floor. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone. We serve Iron Fang, the eternal warrior, he said. He teaches us that strength comes from facing your enemy directly. Every battle is a prayer to his glory. We charge forward, we never retreat, and we die with honor if we must. The other Korthak at his table slammed their fists on the metal surface 3 times. The sound rang through the hall like thunder. Next came the Vexi representative. Her crystalline body sparkled as she rose from her chair. Her voice had the sound of wind chimes in a storm. Shard Render guides our path to victory, she sang. She shows us how to break what seems unbreakable. Every formation we shatter, every defense we pierce, proves her wisdom. We are her cutting edge in this universe. The Myrthal speaker rippled blue and silver as she spoke from her water tank. Her voice bubbled through the translation device. Tidecrusher rules the deep currents of war, she said. He teaches us that victory comes in waves. We flow around our enemies, we surround them. We drown them in numbers they cannot count. Like the ocean, we are patient but unstoppable. The Zephyrian clicked rapidly, his translator working to keep up with the insect language. Hivebreaker commands our swarms. The translation device said in a flat electronic voice. She shows us that many small actions create great victories. We work as one mind, one purpose, one overwhelming force. Our enemies face not soldiers, but a living storm of death. Other species shared their war gods too. The rock-like granite folk spoke of Stone Crusher, who taught them to wear down enemies through endless endurance. The bird-like sky dancers praised Windripper, who guided their aerial attacks. Each species had a deity that matched their nature and their way of fighting. Finally, all eyes turned to the human table. Lisa felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing. General Parker leaned forward slightly, ready to support. Dr. Martinez looked up from her notes, waiting to see how Lisa would handle this moment. The ceremony master gestured toward them with his staff. And now we hear from humanity. Tell us of your war deity, your divine guide in battle. What god teaches humans the sacred art of conflict? The hall was completely silent. Lisa could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. This was the question she had hoped to avoid, but she knew it would come. Every species here defined themselves by how they fought and who they worshipped in war. It was the foundation of galactic culture. She stood slowly, feeling hundreds of alien eyes watching her every movement. The crystal floor reflected her image, making it look like there were two of her standing there. She took a deep breath and prepared to give an answer that would change everything. The Korthek commander leaned forward in his chair, clearly expecting to hear about some human god of battle. The Vex High representative tilted her crystalline head, light refracting through her body as she waited. Even the Murthel in their water tanks had stopped moving, their skin patterns showing pure curiosity. General Parker's hand moved slightly toward his weapon, an old habit from years of combat. Dr. Martinez gripped her datapad tighter, ready to provide historical context if needed. They both knew what Lisa was about to say, and they both knew how the aliens would react. Lisa looked around the hall one more time, seeing all the species that had built their entire cultures around worshipping war. They expected humans to be like them, to have a god that commanded their battles and defined their limits. They had no idea what they were about to learn. "We had one once," Lisa said, her voice carrying clearly through the massive hall. "But we killed him." The silence in the hall stretched like a wire about to snap. Every alien in the room stared at the humans with expressions of shock and confusion. The Korthek commander's red eyes blazed brighter. The Vex High representative made a sound like cracking ice. Even the Murtha's sea skin patterns turned dark colors that meant fear and disbelief. Dr. Helen Martinez stood up beside Lisa. She had spent 30 years studying human history and mythology. If anyone could explain what Lisa meant, it was her. She looked around the room, seeing the confusion and growing anger on alien faces. "You want to understand humans," Helen said calmly. "Then you need to know our history. You need to know about Bellicus, the god we destroyed." She touched a control on her datapad. Holographic images appeared in the air above the human table. The pictures showed ancient Earth, when humans lived in small tribes and fought with swords and spears instead of energy weapons and starships. "Long ago, when humans were young, we had a god of war like yours," Helen continued. "His name was Bellicus, but he was different from your war gods. Very different." The hologram showed a tall figure in armor that seemed to glow with inner light. He carried a sword in one hand and an olive branch in the other. His face was stern but not cruel, strong but not savage. "Bellicus taught us how to fight, yes, but he also taught us when to stop fighting. He showed us that true strength came not from endless war, but from knowing when war was necessary and when it was not." Helen gestured, and the images changed. Now they showed ancient human warriors on a battlefield. But something was strange about the scene. The humans were helping wounded enemies, sharing food with prisoners, and rebuilding destroyed villages. Under Bellicus, human wars were different. We fought hard when we had to fight. But when our enemies surrendered, we spared them. When we won battles, we helped rebuild what we had destroyed. When conflicts ended, we turned enemies into friends. The Korthak commander made a sound of disgust. "Weakness," he growled. "Your god made you soft." Helen smiled, but it was not a happy smile. That's what some humans thought too. The hologram. changed again. Now it showed two human warriors facing each other across a field of battle. One wore armor marked with Bellicus's symbol, a sword and olive branch crossed together. The other wore plain black armor with no symbols at all. These were our champions, Helen explained. Marcus Kane served Bellicus faithfully. He won battles through clever tactics and strategy. He turned enemies into allies. He protected the innocent and spared those who surrendered. The image focused on Marcus Kane. He was a tall man with kind eyes but strong hands. Scars covered his arms from many battles, but his face showed wisdom, not cruelty. Alina Cross fought beside him. She was our greatest military mind. Under Bellicus's guidance, she developed new ways of fighting that confused and defeated enemies without destroying them completely. Alina Cross appeared in the hologram next to Marcus. She was smaller than him, but her eyes burned with intelligence. She held battle plans in one hand and a medical kit in the other. But not all humans accepted Bellicus's way, Helen continued. The hologram shifted to show the man in black armor. Victor Stone led those who thought mercy was weakness. He believed humans should fight like animals, showing no quarter and taking no prisoners. Victor Stone looked like a different kind of human entirely. His face was hard and cruel. His armor was covered in spikes and sharp edges. When he smiled, it was the smile of a predator. For thousands of years, these two philosophies fought within humanity. Bellicus's followers won most of the time because their way was more effective. Enemies joined them instead of fighting to the death. Cities surrendered instead of being destroyed. Wars ended quickly because defeated foes became new. Allies. General Parker leaned forward. But then came the test, he said quietly. Helen nodded. The hologram changed to show something that made several aliens gasp. A massive fleet of black ships filled the sky above ancient Earth. The ships were covered in weapons and armor. They looked like flying fortresses built for one purpose: destruction. The Protodrak, Helen said. An ancient species that existed long before any of you. They had no mercy, no honor, no limits. They destroyed entire civilizations for sport. They turned planets into graveyards just because they could. The images showed Protodrak warriors. They looked like humans, but wrong somehow. Their skin was pale gray, their eyes were black holes, and their mouths were full of sharp teeth. They carried weapons designed to cause maximum pain before death. When they came to Earth, Bellicus's followers tried to fight them the honorable way. Marcus Kane offered terms for surrender. Alina Cross developed strategies to minimize civilian casualties. They showed mercy to captured Protodrak, hoping to demonstrate that not all species were their enemies. The hologram showed human warriors helping wounded Protodrak soldiers. It showed Alina Cross personally delivering food to Protodrak prisoners. It showed Marcus Kane trying to negotiate with a Protodrak commander under a flag of truce. The Protodrak took our mercy and used it against us, Helen continued, her voice growing cold. They pretended to surrender, then killed our medics. They agreed to meet for peace talks, then ambushed our negotiators. They tortured prisoners until they revealed our defensive positions. The images became darker. Human cities burned. Civilians fled in terror as Protodrak forces slaughtered everything in their path. The aliens watching could see that this was not war as they understood it. This was extermination. Victor Stone watched his people die because they followed Bellicus's teachings, Helen said. He watched children killed because their parents showed mercy to enemies. He watched entire cities destroyed because humans tried to fight with honor against an enemy that had none. The hologram showed Victor Stone standing over the bodies of his own family. His wife and children had been killed by Protodrak forces, who had pretended to surrender. His face twisted with rage and grief. That was when Victor Stone said the words that changed everything, Helen continued. He stood before the surviving human leaders and spoke truth that none of them wanted to. Here, the image zoomed in on Victor Stone's face as he addressed a gathering of desperate humans. Fires burned in the background. The sounds of distant battle echoed across the scene. "Our God makes us weak," the hologram showed him saying. "While we spare our enemies, they slaughter our children. While we rebuild, they reduce us to ash. While we show mercy, they show us what mercy gets us: death." General Parker stood up beside Helen. "Stone was right," he said simply. Bellicus's way worked when fighting other humans, or when fighting enemies who understood concepts like honor and mercy. But it failed completely against an enemy that saw kindness as weakness to exploit. Helen touched her controls again. The hologram showed Bellicus himself appearing before his followers. The god looked sad but not surprised. He had watched his teachings fail against pure evil, and he understood what that meant. The god spoke to his champions one last time. Helen said. Marcus Kane and Alina Cross knelt before him, asking what they should do. How could they save their people while staying true to his teachings? The hall was completely silent now. Even the aliens who had been angry or confused were listening intently. They could see where this story was leading, and it terrified them. Bellicus made a choice that no other war god has ever made, Helen said softly. He chose to die. The hologram in the Great Hall shifted again. Dr. Martinez touched her controls, and the image showed Bellicus standing on a mountaintop, looking down at the burning world below. His armor no longer glowed with divine light. His face showed pain that went deeper than any physical wound. The god of war stood alone and watched his people die, Helen said quietly. For the first time in his existence, Bellicus questioned everything he had taught. Was mercy truly strength? Was honor worth dying for? Had he made humans too soft to survive in a cruel universe? The aliens in the hall leaned forward. This was unlike any religious story they had ever heard. Their own war gods never doubted. Themselves never questioned their teachings. The idea of a deity admitting failure was shocking to them. The hologram showed Marcus Kane climbing the mountain to reach his god. The human champion was wounded and exhausted. His armor was cracked and blood-stained. Behind him, the Proto-Drac continued their assault on the last human cities. "My lord," the image showed Marcus saying as he knelt before Bellicus, "our people are dying. Your teachings of mercy have become our doom. What would you have us do?" Bellicus looked at his faithful champion with eyes full of sorrow. "I have watched you follow my path, Marcus. I have seen you spare enemies who later killed your friends. I have seen you rebuild cities that were destroyed again within days. Tell me, do you still believe in my way?" Marcus Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with grief. "I want to believe, my lord. But I have buried too many children who died because we showed mercy to their killers. I have watched too many cities burn because we tried to fight with honor against enemies who have none." The hologram shifted to show Alina Cross arriving at the mountaintop. She moved slowly, carrying wounded soldiers on her back. Her brilliant, tactical mind had failed against an enemy that cared nothing for strategy or clever plans. "Alina, my faithful strategist," Bellicus said to her, "you have created battle plans that turn enemies into friends. You have won wars without destroying civilizations. But now your wisdom seems useless. What do you say?" Alina Cross set down the wounded soldiers and looked up at her god. Her face showed the weight of impossible decisions. "My lord, I have tried every strategy I know. I have offered the Proto-Drac peace, trade, territory, even tribute. They want only one thing, to watch us all die. There is no negotiating with creatures who see mercy as weakness and kindness as invitation to attack." Meanwhile, in the valleys below, Victor Stone gathered the surviving human forces. The hologram showed him standing before thousands of desperate refugees and broken soldiers. His black armor was dented but unbroken. His eyes burned with cold fury. "Look around you," Stone told the survivors. "Look at what following Bellicus has given us. Our cities are ash. Our children are dead. Our enemies mock us even as they slaughter us. And why? Because our God taught us to be weak." A wounded soldier raised his hand. "But Stone, Bellicus has protected us for thousands of years. His way brought us peace and prosperity." Stone laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Peace? Prosperity? Tell that to the families being tortured in proto-drac camps right now. Tell that to the children watching their parents die slowly because we were too merciful to kill our enemies when we had the chance." Another survivor, an old woman clutching a baby, spoke up. "What would you have us do? Become like them? Become monsters?" Stone's voice grew softer, but somehow more frightening. "I would have us become something the proto-drac cannot understand or defeat. I would have us become humans who choose our own limits, not humans who follow the limits of a god who has never faced what we face now." Back on the mountain, Bellicus listened to the distant sounds of battle. He could hear the screams of his followers dying, the laughter of their enemies, the collapse of everything he had tried to build. For the first time in his divine existence, he felt something new, doubt. "Marcus, Elena," he said to his champions, "I must ask you a question that no god should ask. Am I wrong? Have I weakened humanity by teaching mercy and honor?" Marcus and Elena looked at each other. They had served Bellicus faithfully their entire lives. They had built their identities around his teachings, but they could not deny what they saw happening around them. "My lord," Elena said carefully, "your teachings work when fighting enemies who understand mercy and honor. But the proto-drac are not such enemies. They are pure destruction given form. Against them, mercy becomes suicide." Marcus nodded sadly. "We have tried to follow your path, but it leads only to the graves of innocence. Perhaps there are times when the greatest mercy is to show no mercy at all." Bellicus closed his eyes and was quiet for a long time. When he opened them again, something had changed. The god who had taught mercy and honor for millennia looked at his champions with new understanding. "Then I have failed you," he said simply. "I created a philosophy for a perfect world, but this world is not perfect. I gave you rules for fighting honorable enemies, but some enemies have no honor. I made you merciful in a universe where mercy can mean death." The hologram showed Bellicus standing up, his divine form beginning to shimmer and fade. The mountain itself seemed to respond to his decision, rocks trembling and winds beginning to howl. "My lord, what are you doing?" Marcus asked in alarm. Bellicus smiled sadly at his faithful champions. "I am giving you what you need to survive. I am removing the limitations I placed on your people. I am setting you free to become what you must become." The god began to glow with brilliant light, but it was different from his usual radiance. This light was not the warm glow of divine protection. It was the harsh light of transformation, of change, of an ending that would become a beginning. "If my mercy makes you weak in the eyes of those who mistake cruelty for strength, then perhaps I am not the god you need," Bellicus said, his voice echoing across the mountain. "You no longer need a god of war telling you how to fight. You need to become something more dangerous than any god could make you." Elena and Marcus fell to their knees, understanding what was happening but unable to stop it. "You need to become humans who choose when to be merciful," Bellicus continued as his form grew brighter and more transparent. "Humans who decide for themselves what limits to accept. Humans who can be as gentle as lambs or as terrible as storms, depending on what the situation requires." The light became blinding. When it faded, Bellicus was gone, but something new had taken his place in the hearts and minds of every human still alive. Not divine commands, but divine potential. Not rules imposed from above, but power to make their own choices. Marcus and Alina looked at each other, feeling the change inside themselves. They were still the same people, but something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer bound by their God's teachings. They were free to become whatever they needed to become. And in the valleys below, Victor Stone felt the change too. He smiled for the first time since his family died. Now the real war could begin. The hologram changed to show what happened after Bellicus disappeared. Dr. Martinez adjusted the controls, and the image focused on a human military camp 3 days after their god's sacrifice. Everything looked different now. The soldiers moved with new purpose, their eyes harder and more focused than before. Colonel Dan Roberts stood in the center of the camp, studying battle maps with Major Lisa Chun. Both had served under Bellicus's teachings their entire careers, but now they felt something new inside them. The divine restraints were gone. They could think thoughts that had been forbidden before. "The Proto-Drac expect us to fight like we always have," Dan said, pointing to positions on the map. "They expect mercy, honor, predictable tactics. They think they know us." Lisa nodded, her finger tracing enemy positions. "But we're not the same humans who fought them yesterday. We don't have to spare surrendering enemies anymore. We don't have to rebuild their cities. We don't have to show them any kindness at all." The change was visible in every human soldier. They still looked like the same people, but something fundamental had shifted in their thinking. Without Bellicus's divine commands limiting them, they began to see warfare in completely new ways. Victor Stone arrived at the camp that evening. The man who had questioned their god's teachings now found himself leading a species that no longer had a god to question. He looked at the assembled human commanders with cold satisfaction. "The Proto-Drac have been watching us for months," Stone told them. "They know how we fight. They know we try to minimize casualties. They know we offer quarter to enemies who surrender. They have built their entire strategy around exploiting our mercy." Marcus Kane, still loyal to Bellicus's memory, but freed from his limitations, spoke up. "Then we give them what they don't expect. We show them what humans can do when we choose to be merciless." Alina Cross spread new battle plans across the table. Her brilliant mind, no longer constrained by divine rules about protecting enemy civilians, had created something terrifying. "I've designed strategies that use the Proto-Drac's own cruelty against them. They expect us to fight honorably. Instead, we'll fight effectively." The first test came within a week. A Proto-Drac force had surrounded a human city, preparing to slaughter everyone inside as they had done so many times before. But this time, the human response was different. Colonel Roberts led a force that attacked the Proto-Drac camp at night. But instead of the direct assault the aliens expected, the humans used psychological warfare. They played recordings of Proto-Drac death screams through speakers hidden in the darkness. They left bloody symbols from Proto-Drac nightmares painted on trees around the camp. Major Chun commanded a second force that poisoned the Proto-Drac water supply. Not with anything that would kill them quickly, but with chemicals that caused vivid hallucinations and paralyzing fear. The alien warriors found themselves fighting enemies that weren't there while missing the real threats all around them. Most shocking of all, when Proto-Drac forces tried to surrender, the humans ignored them. There were no white flags accepted, no prisoners taken, no mercy shown. The aliens who had spent months exploiting human compassion suddenly found themselves facing humans who had none. The hologram showed the aftermath of the battle. Proto-Drac bodies littered the ground, but no human soldiers were helping wounded enemies or showing respect for the dead. They simply moved on to the next target, cold and efficient as machines. Dr. Sam Hoffman, a scientist studying the war, appeared in the hologram taking notes on the battlefield. He had been documenting human behavior since Bellicus's disappearance, trying to understand what his people were becoming. Day 7 after the transformation, his recorded voice said. Human military effectiveness has increased by 300%. Casualty rates among our forces have dropped to nearly zero. But the psychological changes are more significant than the tactical ones. The image showed Sam interviewing soldiers after the battle. Their faces were calm, showing no signs of the trauma that should have come from such violence. They spoke about killing Proto-Drac the same way they might discuss the weather. We don't feel guilty, one soldier told Sam. We don't feel angry either. We just feel practical. The Proto-Drac are a problem that needs to be solved. Emotion just gets in the way of solving problems. Another soldier nodded in agreement. Before, we fought because Bellicus commanded it, and we showed mercy because he commanded that too. Now we fight because we choose to, and we show mercy only when it serves our purposes. The war continued for months, but the outcome was never in doubt once humans stopped following divine rules. The hologram showed battle after battle where human forces destroyed Proto-Drac armies using tactics that no honorable warrior would consider. They used the aliens' own prisoners as bait in traps. They attacked medical facilities and supply lines instead of just military targets. They studied Proto-Drac psychology and used their fears and superstitions against them. Most importantly, they never showed consistency in their methods, making it impossible for the enemy to predict their actions. Elena Cross developed what became known as the human doctrine during this time. The hologram showed her presenting it to assembled military leaders 6 months after Bellicus's sacrifice. Total warfare when necessary, she explained, but with retained capacity for mercy as a choice, not an obligation. We can be as gentle as our old God wanted, or as terrible as our enemies require. The key is that we decide which approach serves our goals best. The turning point came when the Proto-Drac leadership realized they were losing. For the first time in their species' history, they attempted to negotiate peace. The hologram showed their ambassadors arriving under flags of truce, expecting to deal with the merciful humans they remembered. Instead, they met with Victor Stone and Marcus Kane, who had put aside their old differences to work together. The negotiation was brief and one-sided. You want peace? Stone asked the Proto-Drac ambassador. Then you will surrender unconditionally. You will submit to our judgment. You will accept whatever terms we choose to give you. The ambassador, a creature that had never known defeat, stammered in confusion. But your God teaches mercy. Your people always offer reasonable terms. Marcus Kane smiled coldly. Our God is dead. We killed him for being too soft. Now, you deal with us directly. The final battle of the war lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Proto-Drac civilization was gone. Not destroyed in the sense of being wiped out completely, but transformed beyond recognition. Some survivors were eliminated as examples. Others were re-educated and integrated into human society. Still others were allowed to live as a reminder of what happened to species that mistook human mercy for weakness. But the most important change was in humanity itself. Dr. Hoffman's final report, shown in the hologram, documented what they had become. We are no longer bound by divine limitations, he recorded. We can choose to be merciful when mercy serves our purposes. We can choose to be ruthless when ruthlessness is required. We are not ruled by anger or hatred, but by cold calculation of what works best in each situation. The hologram showed the last scene of the war, human forces helping Proto-Drac children while their parents watched in confusion. The same humans who had shown no mercy in battle were now providing food and medical care to the survivors. This is not kindness, one human soldier explained to a bewildered Proto-Drac parent. This is strategy. These children will grow up remembering that humans can be either their greatest nightmare or their greatest protectors. The choice is theirs. Elena Cross appeared one final time in the hologram, older and more tired, but satisfied with what her people had accomplished. "We learned something our God never understood," she said to the camera. "The greatest mercy is sometimes absolute victory. The highest honor is sometimes being completely dishonorable to your enemies. And the strongest thing you can do is choose your own limits instead of having them chosen for you." The hologram faded away, leaving the great hall of Nexus Prime in complete silence. Dr. Martinez sat down, her story finished. Ambassador Lisa Grant looked around at the alien faces surrounding them. Some showed fear, others confusion, and a few showed something that might have been respect mixed with terror. The Korthek commander was the first to speak. His red eyes had dimmed, and his voice was quieter than before. You killed your own god because he was too merciful?" "General." Ryan Parker stood up slowly. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate armor and robes worn by other species' military leaders, but somehow he seemed more dangerous than any of them. "We didn't kill him because he was too merciful. We killed him because any god of war creates limitations. Gods tell you how to fight, when to fight, who to spare, who to destroy. They make you predictable." The Vex High representative made a sound like breaking crystal. "But without divine guidance, how do you know what is right? How do you choose between mercy and cruelty?" Lisa Grant smiled, but there was something cold in her expression. "We decide for ourselves. Every situation, every enemy, every battle. We choose what works best for our goals at that moment." Commander Kate Williams stepped forward from behind the human delegation. She was young, barely 30 years old, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. The other species had not paid much attention to her before, assuming she was just an aide or assistant. "Let me give you some examples," Kate said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "The Korthek always charge directly because Iron Fang demands frontal assault. We've studied your battles for the past 5 years. You lose 30%. More troops than necessary because you refuse to use indirect tactics." The Korthek commander's face darkened with anger. "How dare you? The Vex High shatter formations because shard render requires spectacular destruction," Kate continued, ignoring his protest. "You could achieve the same tactical results with half the energy expenditure. But your god demands visible displays of power." The crystalline alien started to object, but Kate was already moving on. "The Murthals surround enemies because Tidecrusher teaches patience. But you take 3 times longer to win battles than necessary because you won't risk direct confrontation, even when it would save lives on both sides. The Zephyrians swarm because Hivebreaker demands overwhelming numbers. You could win the same battles with smaller, more focused forces, but your god requires the spectacle of mass attack." Kate paused, looking around the room at increasingly uncomfortable alien faces. "Every one of your war gods has made your military doctrine predictable. We know exactly how you'll fight before the battle even begins." Intelligence Officer Ben Foster approached the human table carrying a data pad. He was a thin, quiet man who had been taking notes throughout the ceremony. Most of the aliens had barely noticed him. "We've had 5 years to study each of your species since humanity first made contact," Ben said. "During that time, we've analyzed your military capabilities, your tactical preferences, your strategic weaknesses, and your command structures." Touched his datapad, and new holograms appeared above the human table. These showed detailed military analyses of every species in the room. Ship designs, battle formations, command hierarchies, supply lines, everything. "The Korthek fleet relies on heavy frontal assault ships with weak rear armor," Ben continued calmly. "A small force attacking from behind could disable their entire battle group in under 10 minutes. The Korthek commander half rose from his chair, his red eyes blazing. "This is an outrage. We are allies. The Vex High use crystalline hulls that shatter spectacularly, but are vulnerable to specific frequency attacks." Ben continued as if the Korthek had not spoken. Their entire military doctrine falls apart if you prevent them from achieving those dramatic visual effects their god demands. More aliens were standing now, voices rising in anger and alarm. But the humans remained calm, almost casual, as they revealed how thoroughly they had analyzed their new allies. The Murthal rely on surrounding tactics that require time to implement. Men said, fast, direct strikes can destroy their formations before they can properly deploy. The Zephyrian swarm tactics are devastating against conventional forces, but completely fail against adaptive defense networks that can adjust to changing attack patterns. General Parker raised his hand, and the alien protests died down. Something in his gesture commanded attention and silence. "You're missing the point," he said quietly. "We're not telling you this to threaten you. We're explaining why we don't need a war god." Dr. Martinez stood again. "Every species here has built their military around divine commands. You fight the way your gods tell you to fight, but gods don't adapt. Gods don't change tactics based on new situations. Gods create rigid patterns that enemies can learn and exploit." Lisa Grant walked to the center of the room, standing beneath the great crystal dome. "We eliminated our war god not because he was too violent, but because any deity of war is too limited. Gods represent absolutes, but war requires adaptability." She gestured to the alien delegations around her. "Your gods taught you to worship war in specific ways. Our God taught us that war is just a tool, like any other tool. When the tool doesn't work, you find a better one." Commander Williams stepped beside her. "We didn't just study your military capabilities during our 5 years of integration. We studied your histories, your cultures, your religions. We know how your gods think because we know how you think." The terrible implications of this began to sink in for the aliens. The humans had not just joined the Galactic Council. They had infiltrated it, analyzed it, and prepared to dominate it if necessary. "But we're allies," the Murthal representative said, her skin patterns showing fear and confusion. "Why would you prepare to fight us?" General Parker's expression was almost gentle, "Because that's what humans do. We prepare for every possibility. We hope for the best, but we plan for the worst. We can be your greatest friends or your worst enemies, depending on your choices." Ben Foster touched his datapad again. "We've also identified the home planets of every species here, mapped your supply routes, cataloged your civilian populations, and calculated exactly what it would take to defeat each of your civilizations if war became necessary." The silence that followed was deafening. Every alien in the room stared at the humans with new understanding. They had thought they were welcoming primitive newcomers to their advanced civilization. Instead, they had invited apex predators into their home. "This is what it means to have no war god," Lisa said softly. "We don't worship war. We don't limit ourselves to specific ways of fighting. We don't follow divine commands that make us predictable. We adapt, we learn. We choose our own rules based on what works." Dr. Martinez nodded. "When we killed Bellicus, we didn't become more violent. We became more practical. We can be as gentle as he ever wanted us to be, or as terrible as our enemies require. The choice is always ours." The ceremony master, who had been silent throughout the revelation, finally found his voice. What do you want from us?" Ambassador Grant smiled, and for the first time it seemed genuinely warm. "The same thing we've always wanted: peace, trade, cooperation, mutual benefit. We prefer to be friends. It's more efficient than being enemies." But General Parker added quietly, "The choice is yours. You can work with us as allies, or you can discover what humans are capable of when we decide you're a threat. Either way, we'll adapt our approach to match your decisions." The aliens looked at each other, each species suddenly aware that they had misjudged humanity completely. The humans had not come to the Galactic Council as supplicants seeking acceptance. They had come as conquerors who preferred diplomacy to war, but were prepared for either. "We eliminated our deity of war for being too soft," Lisa said in closing. "But the real reason was simpler than that. We eliminated him because even the most warlike god couldn't imagine the things humans are willing to do when we choose our own limits." The great hall remained silent as the implications sank in. Every species present realized they were no longer the dominant powers they thought they were. They were all potential prey, sitting across from hunters who had been studying them for years, and the hunters were smiling.